The COVID-19 crisis has changed our society, and as some countries start to ease restrictions, many are now focused on adapting what is called the new normal. For research universities, the immediate effects of the pandemic are only just becoming apparent, with empty lecture rooms, cancelled events, remote working, and all under an increasingly uncertain economic outlook. How will research universities adapt to the new normal? And does this recovery plan look like a restart of research as well in 2020? The purpose of this webinar is to bring together a range of perspectives from research leaders across Europe and share their insights in the potential effects of COVID-19 and how they plan to restart their university or research institution in this post-pandemic world. I am Michiel Koolman. I'm Senior Vice President and Academic Ambassador at Elsevier, and I'm the former President of the International Publishers Association. And I'm delighted to be joined by a very dynamic panel of experts that include Professor Anne Borge, the Rector of NTNU, the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Welcome, Professor Borge.
Thank you. I'm very happy to join you for this podcast seminar. As you said, I come from NTNU. It's the largest university in Norway with 42,000 students and some little more than 8,000 employees. So we are about close to 1% of the Norwegian population.
Okay, welcome to have you. Wonderful.
You. And my background is actually, I'm a professor in condensed matter physics and have been rector permanently since mid-December last year.
Good. Great that you could join our panel. And then we have Professor Arianna Menciassi, who's the Vice-Rector at the University of Santa Anna in Pisa. Welcome, Professor Menciassi.
Thank you very much, and welcome to everybody. Yes, our university is a bit different. So we are a college of honors, a university college of honors. So we have a college. The university is quite small. We have about 1,000 students between bachelor, master, and PhD students. And also the number of professors is around 200. So we are in Pisa. Pisa is a small town in Tuscany, and it is, let's say, it is a college because there are 3 universities with a total of 50,000 students, and in total the population is less than 100,000. So it's a college. You can find universities and rooms for students everywhere. I started as Vice-Rector of Scuola Sant'Anna 1 year ago, and we are Rector and Vice-Rector female researchers. My background is in physics. I thought all people think I am an engineer because I started with a PhD in bioengineering, and so I work in medical robotics.
Great to have you here as well, another physicist. And then finally, we are joined by Jan Palmowski, Secretary General of the Guild, and the Guild is comprised of 20 of Europe's most distinguished research-intensive universities in 14 countries. So welcome, Jan.
Thank you for having me. I'm not a professor of physics, so thank you for having me nonetheless. I'm a professor of modern history at the University of Warwick. Warwick is one of our members, so I'm seconded at the moment to this position as Secretary General. And the Guild has existed since 2016, and so we, as I said, we are actually in 15 countries, and we really go from Norway, Sweden, Scotland, Estonia in the north to Italy in the south, and so we do try to represent really a sort of cross-European segment of outstanding universities.
And you joined us from Oxford, right?
That's right.
Perfect. Well, welcome, Jan. So to get started, I will first give the floor to the panelists who will introduce, you introduced yourself already, but maybe you can give a little bit more how impactful COVID-19 has been on your country and also specifically your institution. So let me start with Professor Borge. Anne, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Well, we were actually aware of the pandemic and actually started at the university to follow the situation in China already in January. And I actually asked students outside Europe on exchange to get back before Norway closed down. And I got quite some comments on that, to be honest. But the thing is that both in Norway and NTNU was closed down March 12th. The exception at the university being that we were allowed to have critical infrastructure and operations running. And also we decided at our university that some experiments that were important to continue, we could continue. Because the basic idea of the government was to get the students out of campus. And then it was, we were asked then to as much as we could to use home offices. So that was the starting point. So it actually made it possible, which is interesting in this context, I think, that since we didn't close down completely, that some of our researchers, they invented a new test method for the coronavirus using nanotechnology and combining it with medical technology. And that, of course, I'm very proud of. And we didn't only invent the method, but now we are a production unit for it. So we can do 100,000 tests a week, and we can increase it to 150,000, and we are covering the whole of Norway.
Wow,
so,
that's quite impressive.
Yeah, so we have enough tests in Norway, because that was really an issue at the Northeast stage.
Anna, could you relocate to the United Kingdom? We need your tests.
Oh yeah, yeah. The thing is that this is interesting because we are a university, and of course when you do tests in medical areas, you have to go through a very strict acceptance regime. But then because of the coronavirus, the health authorities were saying that we were allowed to do this. So now I have a factory at chemical engineering for this purpose. Well, which is actually in the labs, but anyway. So, but now from end of April, Norway started reopening, first with kindergartens and schools, and still with strong restrictions. And we were allowed to have some students coming back. For example, master students that needed to do experiments to finish their master thesis. So that happened. With the only restrictions that we see as a university now is the general restrictions regarding infection control, which is actually like keeping a distance of 1 meter, and then all the more hygienic measures, washing hands and so on, and keeping things clean. But otherwise, we can allow now our employees to come back, and also a larger portion of our students are coming back right now. So, so actually now it's quite a few students, and in some faculties up to perhaps 30–40% of the employees are now back on campus, but living within these restrictions. So that's sort of the situation right now.
I see that we've lost Mikhail, but perhaps can we go on to Jan to carry on?
Yes, of course. So I maybe, if I maybe present what it looks like from a network of universities. So it seems to me there was a really crucial week in, I think the second and third week of March, when really pretty much all of our universities across Europe switched to online, to 100% online, pretty much overnight, 24, 48 hours notice. And that, I think, first of all, was just a huge achievement by universities, by staff, by students. I mean, it was really extraordinary what was achieved there. And I think that really, first of all, really, should make us all very proud of our universities. Second, and I should also add that in a number of instances, including in my own network, universities, and Anna alluded to this, universities were actually ahead of our governments, and very often they got some flack from their governments for doing what they did so early, and that criticism only lasted for a few days, but nonetheless, I think universities were ahead, and that was not always appreciated by the governments at that particular time. But that said, I think secondly, universities became key source of trusted advice for the governments. When it comes to modeling, when it comes to the societal effects, when you look at how, for instance, in Germany, the academy, the Leopoldina Academy, which is composed of huge number of university scientists from right across the disciplinary spectrum, has been the key source of advice for the German government. When you look at how other universities really have provided modeling expertise, they are right in the core research for coronavirus. They've, Anna alluded to this, they've offered their labs to testing and to further research, and they're in the heart of providing new solutions for responding to coronavirus, be it the search for a vaccine, but be it responding to some societal effects of the vaccine. I mean, there's a huge amount of work that's been going on in our universities. On top of that, of course, universities have provided huge numbers of medical students that have also really made themselves available to help wherever they can. Third, I would say that universities have been in dialogue with funders. So it's to make sure that the effects on research and the effects on students could be mitigated as best as possible. And we have been in a very close dialogue, and a very good dialogue with, for instance, the European Commission when it comes to the consequences on Erasmus, but also on Horizon 2020. The Commission has extended deadlines and has really tried to respond as flexibly as we could. And maybe I'll just leave it there. But I think that But I think the overall impression that I get is that universities really have stepped up to the plate and then some in their responsiveness. And I do think that really changes. I hope that this will really change the nature of the conversation in the future. Just about the university's role in policy and society. And we can come back to that later.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. Great introductions. So let me move on to the question part. So the first one is based on the World Bank calculations in April of this year. Universities and other educational institutes were closed in 175 countries. And it really affected over 220 million students. And they said their studies were either ended or significantly disrupted by the coronavirus. So from your perspective as a research leader, what does your university look like now during the COVID-19 pandemic? And will the new normal, what does it mean for your university in the coming weeks and potentially months? So let me start again with Jan.
So I think that right now, I think universities are trying to, so universities have discovered what is possible online, and a lot is possible, but I think we're also discovering why actually face-to-face and physical teaching and research and being in teams is really important. And so I think we're rediscovering, I think, the value of research and universities and education as social activities as well. And so I think universities are trying to do as much as they safely can, both in teaching and in research. I think until we have sorted this thing, and that may take a long time, there are some things that we can already predict. I think we will really not have 500, 600 person lectures for the foreseeable future, I think. So we will have more forms of blended learning. We will have to adjust our labs. But I think that universities are really focusing on, right now, it's my impression anyway, on really making sure, on being as flexible as they can in a really uncertain environment. So really not just having a plan A, but also having a plan B and a plan C.
Good. Let me go on to Arianna. And sorry, you didn't get the chance to fully introduce your institute and yourself. So let me first give you the floor for that, and then maybe you can pick up that question as well.
Yes, thank you. Concerning how to come back to work, we managed this pandemic event. So in our case, the most relevant, okay, the lockdown in Italy was a sudden lockdown. So we discovered to be a lockdown between Sunday and Monday, and this was awful in terms of also informing people, employers, everybody. And there was also an area, a very red area in the north part of Italy. So we had to manage the moving of people from Lombardy and the north to the south and to the center where we stay. So first of all, we had to, let's say, to manage the college, because we had students inside the college, and at a certain point we discovered that it was not possible. So we had to manage the number of people in the rooms, the people spending the weekend in another country or in another region and coming back. So it was a very critical couple of days that we were able to manage with a big of the institute and of the personnel devoted to the safety rules inside the school. Then after few days, we moved all the teaching online. We were able to manage also the student, and we started to work with the students because we are a research university with many PhD students, foreign PhD students. So they live in Pisa, but they have to be managed in terms of medical doctors, insurance, everything. And there were many students abroad, especially in USA, where major problems to come back. So all the offices of Scuola Sant'Anna tried to help these students. At a certain point, let's say end of March, we were good set in terms of people. For the teaching, no major problem. So coming back to the lab, we started to reopen all the institute not for teaching, but for research, for master thesis, for PhD thesis, especially for untenured people who needs to stay in the lab. We started on May 4. And we started by using thermal scanner and also a very nice app triage that was developed by our student. I show you just an example. So for example, this is not possible to see, but when, anyhow, when I enter the Scuola Sant'Anna every day, I have this app triage to be filled in, to be completed with the thermoscanner data. And so it is not mandatory, but you are strongly suggested. And so we manage our research, our personnel. And finally, in terms of research in this period, we have we have an hospital connected to our institution, but we have no specific activities related to virus and the vaccination. But we have many activities on robotics. So there were many projects launched and funded by the European Commission, by the government, for robotics for disinfection. So we launched many calls, and with a limited budget, because in many cases with 50 euros you can do a lot, our spin-off companies or our groups were able to modify mobile robots with UV, for example, for disinfection. And some of those robots have been already put in hospitals or in airport during the lockdown. So this was also very nice to see all these young students, young researchers involved in this pandemic event, even if not involved in vaccination and medical care directly.
So the next time I visit Pisa, I will be greeted by a robot. And the question itself, so are you getting used to the new normal? What are the implications for your university there?
Okay, for the teaching, we are still online. regarding new normality, it's difficult to say. We are divided in different institutions, research institutions. What I can say is that research institutions for experimental science, they are going fast to the normality because we need to stay in the lab, we need to assemble, we need to make tests. So thanks to the triage, to the app triage, we are able to monitor the people entering the different labs, and so we are seeing to the increase week by week of the people in the lab. We are organized in different turnations in order to avoid to have 10 people all together in the same room to the test. So we have we are living with Google Docs for managing the presence in the different labs. But I have to say that we are discovering how much is nice to be together, not only online, but also around the same prototype, even if with 1 meter or 2 meter and the mask, we have mask with us everywhere, to brainstorm around the physical things. That is important, especially for robotics. So you have to touch something, or to see together the same prototypes. And we discovered that many things can be done online, but brainstorming around prototypes for embodied intelligence is important.
So in that sense, you echo the points that Jan also made. Thank you, Arianna. So let me move on to Anne. So what was the situation in Trondheim and in Norway?
Yeah, well, right now, I think for most universities, I think I agree very much to what Jan was describing. It's very much the situation, and we've also had very close contact with our Ministry of Research and Higher Education in this situation. So everything's been digital this spring, including exams that are running right now at our university, and everything's from home. So it's remote everything. So that's how it went. And one of my colleagues were saying that this is taking us 10 years ahead in terms of digitalization. And I think that is actually true, because we've really got a boost on that. But what we are planning for is really, as you also mentioned, Jan, during fall, to have a blended scheme for the studies. My ambition is that I want all students back on campus in August. And we believe it's doable, but of course we cannot use the rooms as we usually do. If everyone's going to be 1 meter apart, there are some restrictions. And as Jan also was mentioning, large lectures in larger auditoriums, I do not foresee, not during fall, and I think it will even be a question mark during spring. But it means that we work on what should be sort of physical activities where you gather the students on campus, and what's suited for the digital domain. So that's something that we're working on, and also we see that we need to train our teachers, because of course not all of them were very experienced in going digital to the extent that they had to do in March. But I also would like to point out that our employees, they have been doing a tremendous job. And I think that our students have been patient also, I should say. Right now, I think that our researchers, they are more or less back, those that are working experimentally. So I think that is sort of on a good track right now. But of course, there are some delays, especially for some PhDs and postdocs. And there are, of course, because of travel restrictions, that also imposes some limitations for some activities. I mean, if you want to go abroad for fieldwork, we do not have the same possibility to go to and on sabbaticals or exchange. So there are many things that are still affected. And I don't know if we were going to talk about economic consequences afterwards, but I think that is still something that's not so clear, because we do not know. I haven't seen the results from the exams yet, if students are doing their exams or if they leave the studies, because I think it's both for our employees and for our students. I think the psychological pressure and solitude has actually affected many in their situation. The good thing, I think, is that also Jan pointed out that we have realized how important our campuses are for both our researchers, our employees, and our students. And we will go into a different world, but it's certainly not going to be only digital. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Yeah, great. You mentioned that you would like all 100% of your students to return in the fall. Is this kind of the common response, or is this an exceptional response for university?
Well, in Norway, I think that's the ambition, and I think when I talk to my rector colleagues, I think that they say they want to have sort of a mixed or blended situation during fall. But of course, in Norway, and I guess that also applies other places, is that the municipalities can impose specific restrictions. So it might that, for example, Jan's colleague at the University of Oslo, that he cannot do the same things as I can in Trondheim, Warwick, and Ålesund, where we are located, because there may be some restrictions from the community around. I think transportation is actually, buses, public transportation is actually a big issue in this context. But I think it's possible for us. But it may mean that we have to extend the teaching hours. We have had labs in the evenings, but then perhaps more lectures or seminars and group activities using more hours of the day. So that may be one way of solving it. And then perhaps to keep the distances, that when you do not have activities on campus, perhaps you will have to leave campus. So we are looking into this right now, how to organize it. But I think it's so important for us as a university really to welcome all our students back. But if I have to make limitations, I will give priority to the first year students.
Yeah, that's what I also hear in the Netherlands, that certainly all the freshmen, so to say, they will have to come and be there in person, but it's not so clear for the other students. Jan, what's your perspective from your members? Same as in Norway, or is it a lower percentage that will physically come back to the campus in September?
So again, as Anna said, as many will try and get all of their students back as possible, and I think a lot of will depend locally on what the situation is like. And again, there is going to be a huge emphasis on first years especially, and of course also in the question of how do you blend the learning. Then I think ensuring that first year students, maybe followed by final year students, that they have more face-to-face contact than maybe second year students. Maybe those are the kinds of priorities that are being made. What I would like to point out, in addition to Anna, is the international students. I mean, that is the big, and I think Arianna mentioned that already, that the international students are the big risk area, because I think there are a number of our universities that have already said that they will not seek to have physically present international students. Others would like to have them, but don't think they can have them, just because there's so many uncertainties around travel, around quarantine measures in some countries and so forth. And this is a big problem, not just maybe even for the autumn, but even beyond that, until this crisis is resolved. How do we how do we ensure that, I mean, we are international in our DNA. So how do we ensure that international researchers can continue to come? How do we ensure that we can continue to collaborate as we did? And okay, so some conferences are finding new formats, and that's actually to be welcomed, I think. But it's a big issue, and as new borders are being erected in Europe and across the world, mentally but also physically, how do we ensure as universities that we will continue to be these places that are really truly international, that inspire generations of young people at a really important age, that they will also be the ambassadors of international openness, open-mindedness in a sense.
Arianna, how is that in Pisa? So are you also aiming at get 100% of the students back in September? And how do you attract or host or engage with the international students going forward?
Yes, for the Honors College, we have a very tough competition that normally is done in presence. And this year it will be a combination of some test at home, some interview by Skype, so a different way, but okay, we have limited number of places, of positions, so we think that are not major problems. Even if we are related, we are connected to the general university, the Pisa University, and so I know that they are going totally in remote teaching also for the next semester, at least for the bachelor. For the master degree, for the master courses, it's possible a blended combination. What I have observed in terms of international students is that we did a test just yesterday. We closed our application for PhD student in biorobotics. We have about 8-9 PhD courses in Scuola Sant'Anna, and one of these closed the application yesterday. And so it was a sort of test for us. So let's see how many students will come from abroad, will apply from abroad. Applying is simple because you have just to apply, but anyhow, you see if there is a trend towards moving again. And I was really surprised. I think that people like to go back to a real international world in research, because we had the boom of 105 applications. That is at least 50% more than in the past, and especially from people not only from Iran, Pakistan, India, China, but also Russia, Mexico, USA. So I don't know why we have still to think about this boom. In Italy, it's different from other countries. We have special application days, so we are not opening PhD position time by time. But anyhow, we can make a comparison with previous years. So until 2 days ago, my feeling was, okay, we will experience a drop in just a local application, and no. So very difficult to foresee the future.
So you've become more attractive for international students because of the pandemic.
Maybe because we are not in the north part of Italy, so we are considered safer.
Yeah.
Or maybe for the topics, because this specific PhD is in robotics, and robotics for biomedicine, and so people are attracted to be part of the play, let's say. I don't know. It's difficult to make comments because until 2 days ago, I had a completely different mind.
And Anna, how many of the students, what is the percentage of international students you usually have at your institute?
I don't remember the numbers exactly, but perhaps about 5%, just to give you some indication. I mean, we are, as Jan is saying, of course, we are international institutions, and we actually have students and employees from more than 100 countries. So of course, it is affecting us. And actually, when we had the Corona breakout, we had more than 1,200 exchange students abroad. So it was really a big thing, really, to get them back. And still we have some that did not return, and some they have had big difficulties afterwards. But saying that, we have accepted students for our international master programs. The problem in Norway right now is that the authorities are not allowing students that are coming, or also other people coming from outside Europe for the time being, to enter Norway. And we foresee that that situation may actually stay until end of the year. So for those students, we will have to look into digital education to the extent that they have actually infrastructure where they are for the time being. So that is the question. But also I think that being international institutions, we really have people going abroad among our employees, our PhD students, postdocs coming in and out. And we've seen many difficulties with for example, newly recruited professors that have not been able to come. We now, when we offer PhD positions, I mean, how are we going to fill them? How long will it take before these people can actually come? So there's a number of questions that we have to address. And it's really illustrating how international we are, and which we, of course, we want to continue being. But there are a lot of things that we have to deal with in the current situation. And I think that will actually persist also the rest of the year.
Thank you. So I want to move on to another topic, and I think it was alluded to already, and that is the economic downturn, which is expected, unfortunately. So how do you see the effect for your universities because of the economic climate going forward? And let me start with Jan.
Sorry, I'm probably the worst person to start with because I'm not, I can't give the detail of any single university, but
no, I realize that. That's for
yeah,
members of the guild.
It really depends on how universities are financed, whether they're financed in a sort of 2 or 3 year blocks, or whether they're financed from 1 year to the next. We see dramatic consequences, for instance, in the UK, where universities are really financed through to a significant extent through student fees, including international student fees. But I think that universities, whether there's an immediate effect or long or kind of 2 or 3 year budget cycle, they will face declining public spending abilities. And so I think that in Europe, what you can probably expect is a differentiation between those countries that then choose to invest in research innovation as a way out of the recession. That's what we've seen in 2008. So countries like Germany and Sweden have boosted their GDP investment. Other countries, very often in the south of Europe, I think Spain, Italy, southeastern, so many Eastern European countries have chosen to cut back on their investment in research innovation. And so what you saw as a result of that was a greater differentiation in Europe and in universities and in research innovation spending. And there is a risk that that is going to set in again. In the European Union, we've just seen in the last week the proposal for a new multi-annual financial framework that increases the headline figure for Horizon Europe, but it actually there is a danger that it slightly reduces the amount available for research, especially for fundamental research, because all of that increase is going. It looks like much of that increase, if not all of that increase, is really going into challenge-led applied research, high TRL kind of research. The European Innovation Council. So you can also see shifts in the type of funding that is available through third-party funding, certainly at European level, and I would expect in some national systems too.
Do you also see a shift say, more towards the life sciences or the medical sciences at the expense of, say,
yeah,
physics or engineering.
Yes. Absolutely. So all of the areas that have been prioritized for the new money to flow into, they are related to the Green Deal, to the digital, and health, and of course it is an ambition within Horizon that there's interdisciplinarity, including SSH, in all of these domains. But the proof is in the pudding, and it is striking that those increases haven't been earmarked for SSH-led domains. And as I said, this is not just the EU. I would expect effects like this to happen to be present in many countries, though not all.
So Jan kind of alluded to it, that in the north there might be more funding for universities, and in the south less. And we have two universities represented here from both regions. So Anne, do you already see that? Is there more money coming towards you in Norway?
Well, that's sort of a somewhat mixed picture, I would say. Research-wise, I think it's a little early to say. Except that there have been some economical packages provided by the government, and they have been directed, I would say, to the more applied side, and in particular towards innovation and startups. Because in Norway, we see how vulnerable we are also, because we are heavily depending on oil and gas industry, and also mixing the corona with low oil and gas prices. This actually affects us in different ways. And it's clear that we have to have a more diverse business market and jobs in Norway. So that is one point. But I'm optimistic that they will actually also spend more funding on research, but I would expect them to also go towards the applied areas that I think we probably will see. But at the same time, I think that they realize also how important the universities and university colleges are, because we also now in the revised national budget, the government has proposed to increase the number of students being accepted to the universities and university colleges, and with funding attached to that, plus a number of new PhD positions that they will also fund. So that is a way of directly funding the universities. But as you were mentioning, these areas are technology, and in particular ICT, it's health, but it also is teacher education in Norway, because we need more teachers. So they are more focused than sort of giving the whole broad picture. So it's a way of controlling in which areas they want more students to be educated. For
in Sweden, right? That they're trying to get more students to kind of re-educate themselves, maybe also different fields during the crisis. So when we come out of the crisis, they will have an even better educated workforce ready. Yeah,
but I think, that is another aspect of this, because lifelong learning is a big topic in Norway, and we are really preparing for taking on some more duties with that. We are actually doing a whole lot at my university already, but it's too scattered still, and it's a big issue, because if people are going to change their field, they also need to update their knowledge, and our sector really has to prepare for that in this situation. But we also see sort of a downside, which we may have, because we have a main profile in science and technology, and we are collaborating very closely with businesses in different projects that are mainly funded by, for example, Research Council of Norway or EU. And we are not sure, at least from the Norwegian side, if the businesses have a situation after the crisis that they can actually now invest in research projects at the same level as they have been so far. And that's sort of a more long-term issue for us, as well as are the students finishing their exams, because we also have part of our funding from that. But we are compared to many other countries, I think we're in a very good position also because we do not have tuition fees at all in Norway, and that puts us in a very special situation.
Yes. Arianna, how is it in Italy? Do you expect the funding for universities to go up or down? Is there any indication, or is it too early to tell?
Yes, in Italy, just before the end of the very rigid lockdown, there was the famous Decreto Rilancio, so a general decree in managing many help from the government for different areas of the countries in different segments. And concerning university, there was a special measure with additional assistant professor position for the next year, totally unexpected. So the effect is not possible to be seen just now, but there is the possibility for the university to recruit more people, with all the problems of international recruitment and so on. But let's see if the process will start in a few months. Maybe the situation will be better. Concerning there was an help for digitalization in general, not only for university, but maybe most important for younger students from the elementary school, because this was one of the main issues during the lockdown, so the education low level, because in this case, there is totally different story behind. So some additional position for recruitment in terms of help with the digitalization, yes, so maybe some helps to improve the ICT department, the ICT solutions for university. One problem that, for example, we are experiencing as a research university is related to funds, that we have several running projects from the European Commission, from private partners, from the Italian government. And normally, these projects have been extended, for example, for a couple of months without any additional budget. This is already good, but the problem is that you have to pay people at least for a couple of months, and so at the end of the project you are in a shortage of budget. So all this stuff is, I have not a clear answer. The picture is really a mixed picture, so you can negotiate with your partners about a tuning of the final expected results. This is everything ongoing, but this is a problem. So we try to not stopping the contracts. We try to continue to pay people, even if completely locked down, even if they were normally involved in very practical, technical activities. But at the end of the story, you have to pay 2 or 3 months more, and the budget is the same budget. It's a very trivial consideration, but I think all my colleagues are experiencing similar problems.
Could I just comment that
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that applies to everyone, because this close down has actually delayed for both projects and PhD students that we have given priority to. And then if you add up what the costs are for salaries because of these delays, it's quite substantial amounts of money. And it's not clear how that will, I mean, if we will get any support for that, that is not clear at this point. So, yeah.
I want to jump to the final question, and that is, we have this opportunity to kind of reshape our society after the pandemic. And I would be very interested to explore with you what the role is for universities in shaping a new world, so to say, hopefully a better world post-pandemic. And Anna, maybe I can start with you.
Yeah, I think the pandemic has really shown how important research is. I think that very many of the decisions that have been made, and it has really given a focus on how we can use research also to make decisions and support the politicians. So I think that it really illustrates that we have a very important role in society, and also that they now ask us, for example, to take on more students. I mean, this is a way of supporting our countries and also the sort of the global development. So I think that we've learned that. I think that we will play a more important role in terms of lifelong learning, as I already mentioned. I think that it will change somewhat also the way we are working together. But also I think that at least for some of us, it's been very clear that this situation and some of the things that are happening around the world is also showing that we have a very essential role in society, that academic freedom and institutional autonomy is perhaps more important than ever, because this is something that we are seeing, that there are more regimes that would like to impose restrictions. And I think that the free role of the universities is also the best way really to be a good player for developing the societies.
Arianna, what is your perspective? How will your university, shape the future in Italy?
I have to totally share the words by Anne. One point more, depending also on our specific nature of the university, is interdisciplinarity. So with the pandemic, what we realized is that one discipline is not enough. So the pandemic was a medical problem. So we need to think about vaccination and medical care, but you cannot do it without management. So, for example, in our university, we discovered one time more how much is important that managers in healthcare system can work together with medical doctors to define which is the best, for example, solution for the managing of the lockdown, and how it's important that medical doctors work together with engineers, for example, for all the stuff related to the assistance of patients. So again, I totally share the position by Anne, but I think that one thing more I can say is that the importance of the interdisciplinary, without barrier, without lockdown between disciplines.
Great. And Jan, can I give you the floor for the final answer, because we're almost out of time, but it's still an important question. So take your time to.
I will really just echo and reinforce these points. So maybe starting with the point of academic freedom, and I think it's really important for us to, for the future, use this opportunity to not just demand academic freedom in the way that we use it against government interference, but that we also make the point that we can only do what we do best if we are critical friends to government and society. So it's really about explaining our role and arguing why we do what we do best, when we're not just an echo chamber for everything that's going on around us, but when we have that critical voice, even if politicians don't like it. That leads me also again to the second point, again, it was made before, about the importance of research. And I think that what we really need to do in the future, what we're learning now, I think, is that we need to work very, very hard to underline the uncertainty around research, that the research is not just about getting a quick fix, getting the vaccine by, you know, the year end. There are many things we do not know, and there are many things scientists do not know, and science is also about argument. That is how we, you know, engage, you know, improve our thinking. That is how new ideas are formed. And in a world where we, you know, which demands 140 character answers, we really need to be, I think, more aggressive. And well, aggressive is not the right word. We need to be more assertive about the importance of accepting uncertainty, even if we don't like it. And that is, I think, also the only way to then respond to the kind of criticism for now growing demonstrations against, in a sense, science, because people don't like the answers. And finally, I do think this is such an important point about interdisciplinarity. What we've seen, I think, probably now in this crisis is our researchers coming together even more than before about right across the disciplines, as they've really understood how COVID challenges us in all of our domains. And I say even more because I've always rejected this idea that universities are in these ivory towers that aren't interdisciplinary. I think that's been outdated for a long time. But I do think there is now a new opportunity for us to recognize how different disciplines can really help us find solutions, not just to COVID, but to climate change, to so much of the massive challenges that we face. And we need to use this opportunity to, I think, work very, very hard with governments and with funders to enable them to understand how we need the entire breadth of knowledge in order to approach these massive challenges. And I think that there is still a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Can I just briefly?
Yes, some final words.
Yeah, this very important because, and I think this approach with the uncertainties, and also not only the politicians and stakeholders, but also the population, that they have learned to understand that things cannot be certain. And I think that has really, that can really be transferred to deal and get a more sustainable world and to have a more sustainable development. I think that is also something that is very important that we take on board and use this opportunity to develop this further also in that direction.
Great. I think perfect final words. I would like to first thank all my colleagues who helped to set this up and to prepare this session. And I want also a big thank to all the three panelists. So Jan, Anne and Arianna, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the discussion and I hope you did as well. And so I look forward to work with you in the future as well. All right, thank you again. And thank you for this session. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good, that went really well.